I'm going to read a Walter Brueggemann
Yes.
prayer to start today on reading the Psalms. Sure I am. This is called 1,000 Glad Answers. You speak such words of promise, and we answer. 1,000 times we answer in 1,000 tongues. We answer in hymns of praise. We answer in songs of thanksgiving. We answer in lyrics of gladness. We answer in candor about hurt. We answer in abrasive anger. We answer in deep abandonment. We answer and draw close to you, and in answering, we are changed. Given freedom, come to truth, bound in obedience. We answer and are yours, all yours, not our own, yours, and glad that we belong to you, our faithful Savior. Amen.
Amen.
So you get in that little bit of a prayer / poem from Brueggemann, what we find, excuse me, my phone is now buzzing, my arm is buzzing. So everything's happening, but nothing. All right, so anyway, Brueggemann, I'm gonna use part of his book. He's written a book called Spirituality of the Psalms. It's going to be hard for you to see. It's a little tiny book, and and actually Rabbi Feld references Brueggemann's book, and we read about it in the introduction a bit. He quotes him in the introduction a little bit. So I read Brueggemann's book because I thought, well, that seems like an easy read. It wasn't, but so what we plan to do here is, I said it's Psalms as poetry, or maybe we should say the poetry of the Psalms. I think if we understand them as poems, we don't read them the same way, right, as we read a short story or a novel or historical fiction, right? You don't read poetry in that same way, do we? We read poetry very differently, and we don't frequently, I think this is one of the things from the introduction that I picked up, people quote the Psalms regularly, like a line of the Psalms, and that would be like quoting a line of poetry. It would be like saying Shakespeare is the same as saying, 2 lines from Macbeth, or, what's in a name, and thinking that you know some Shakespeare. So we never take that out of context, right? This is, I think his point being that we ought to perhaps read the Psalms in their entirety, not meaning all 150 in a setting, but if we're reading a Psalm, which is, I think, his premise for my kind of why he chose the Psalms he chose, and how we're going to use those, but that we will be reading them in their entirety. Not Psalm 119, obviously, right? That's the longest Psalm in the Psalm. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to not be reading Psalms about conquest, or the retelling of history, or certain other things. We are going to be reading specific Psalms that really point toward his way of understanding the Psalms. In the preface, Rabbi Feld talks about why the Psalms had become important to him. And I don't know if any of you read that. But the preface indicates that that he wanted to, that his own searching for meaning in some way, his struggle with the search for meaning, was reflected in the Psalms that he read. He didn't quite know what to do with it at the time, but he knew that, say, for example, the lament really resonated with him. That was some place where he felt like on some days he knew God, and he knew what his purpose was, and on other days, he had no idea who God was or what his purpose was. And that is what drew me to the book, in fact, because I think it's part of the human condition that we fall in and out of knowing for ourselves about who God is and what our purpose is. And I appreciate both his vulnerability and his honesty about that. And that if reading the Psalms could lead us in that particular way. I think that was what I was most attracted to by that. Welcome, Ginger.
Hello, Allison. Hello, Earth. And Sharon is here
And
too.
Sharon, nice work.
Hi. Is that Laura Flaherty?
Yep.
Yep, it is.
What's up, sweetie? I'm
Looks
sorry, I'm
good.
interrupting class. I'm really sorry.
You are,
I know.
but we were prepared for it.
It's my book.
Isn't that what I said, y'all? On the website or on the notice about this class, there was a syllabus. I sent it to Carrie earlier in the week, and also a way to read the 5 tips for reading the Psalms and some other parts like that. So,
I got the syllabus, but I didn't get the rest.
All right, well, I'll talk with her today, and they're just extra reading for y'all, right? Like, it's not stuff it's stuff we may or may not cover. Do you know what I mean? It may just
Okay.
be, if you have questions or something comes up, can you pass those on, Ginger?
Yeah.
Okay. And I also have a handout, which I'll scan, but it's from Yale, and it's, there's a whole course. If you go and Google, Psalms or whatever, Yale has a whole course on the Psalms. Professors talking about to each other about the Psalter and the different parts of the Psalter and all that. So if you want to be more scholarly in the sense of this, like if you want to really attack this thing from a scholarship perspective, there's information out there, right? Like I'm not going to be, this is not a college class on I will include some history and some of that, but it's not, it's more about your experience as you read the Psalms, right? Your own interaction with the Psalms is more what I'm concerned about. Not, there's Westerman and, I'm trying to think of the other, Mowinkle and, the third guy, I can't think of his name right now. But those folks, for 150 years, people have been writing about the structure of the Psalms and their place in the literary genre and giving and finding, making all the criticism and doing all that stuff. That's there, it exists, and I think the people that we will be reading, both Brueggemann and Feld, those two people build on what their work was, right? Like that's an accepted way of reading the Psalms or understanding the Psalms in our canon. I'm not going to go back and talk about literary criticism or things I barely understand and would just confuse people more, I'm afraid. But if you find it interesting and you need that and you want that, that's there and it exists. And I found really a ton of resources on the Google, on the web, both in written form and also in video form. So, it might be helpful. Often in Protestant tradition, the Psalms, they talk about the Psalms as pointing toward the Messiah, and the Psalms do talk about the Messiah. I want to kind of cover this one little thing before I get any further. Yes, the Psalms talk about a Messiah and the kingdom to come, but they're not written with foreknowledge of Jesus as that Messiah. It does not mean that that's not how we read them looking backwards. We do. It just means it comes if we read them with that sort of supposition. You realize that we have a prejudice, right? We're setting it up. We do know the rest of the story, but that's not how they were written. So Yes, ma'am.
Your coffee almost fell over.
Oh, thanks. So, so that, I mean, I can say more about that later as it comes up, but it may not ever come up. You all may be reading, so what I'm asking is that you read the Psalms with what scholarship does call like a naivete. You've heard this before, right? That you read it like you've never read it before. That you read it with new eyes.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that the rabbi talks about in the introduction. In fact, at the end of the introduction, he says somewhere, on page 5, my new glasses are coming, and I can really use them. I want to encourage readers to look at Psalms with fresh eyes and to view them personally. And if you know how I lead Bible study, that frequently I will ask, where does this story bump up against your story? And that's what I want you to be thinking about when you read these Psalms. And we're not going to read 150 Psalms. We're going to read whatever he's laid out in these 18 chapters, 18
He
Psalms.
said it was only 10% of it.
Yeah, 10% of the Psalms, right. He does take a smattering from, and he does agree with Brueggemann here, that the Psalms are could be divided, yes, they're divided into 5 books. I get all that, right? And the 5 books sort of mirror the Torah. The Pentateuch. But Brueggemann says it can be really seen as easily as there are Psalms of orientation that look at how good things are, how connected to God we are, how great creation is, how delightful you can think, and Psalm 1 is one of those. And then there are Psalms of disorientation. This is a pattern in our lives too, right?
Mhm.
We have times when we feel like we've got it all together, and then someone throws new information at us, or we have an attitude of suffering, something happens, and it pulls us into disorientation, where that might be a time, we might call that wilderness time. We might call it a lot of things, right? A time when the things that we know work now don't work. That's disorienting, right? Where is God? Did God cause this? Did you cause this? Right? These are the questions that we carry. And then what Brueggemann calls the third category, reorientation, where we now have all this new information, and then it's slotted for us like, now what are we going to do? What do we do as a result of that? So most Psalms can fall into this. Now, are there Psalms that do both? Maybe we find that often, that Psalms will like be going along praising God, and then all of a sudden there's a line thrown in there about, woe is me, something terrible has happened, and then we go back and want to resolve like God is still good. The church for a long time has not, and Brueggemann talks about this, has left out of its canon, like in liturgy often, the Psalms of Lament, because we don't quite know what to do with them. They might not match up completely with our theology, and I mean liturgically or from a ecclesiastical point of view. I don't mean, we in a liturgical and a lectionary based church do read through the Psalter. Like if you do morning, noon, and evening prayer, you read through the Psalter in 30 days, right? That we don't leave Psalms out. But some places just don't, what do people know? Because they're unresolved and they bring up these questions that cannot easily be answered. Now, what does that mean? In church language, we call that theodicy. Is anybody familiar with that word? the Odyssey, but you don't know what it means, but you've heard it.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it means, it just means, why is God acting in this way?
Mm-hmm.
Or it means, why do bad things happen? Or how did evil get in the world? And it's not necessarily about evil. It's about, if God is a loving God, these are the questions, right? Why does God allow blank? If God is a loving God, why does God allow, right? I'm looking for some recognition from you all on the screen about this, if you understand what I'm talking about there. So, and many traditions have very pat ways of answering that. And what is that? Sin. And it puts the person in the place of creating the reason God responds as God responds. So that's the answer. And sometimes the Psalms don't neatly fill that. They don't do it. So ambiguity, vulnerability, lack of absolute knowing, if that's necessary in a church, sometimes the Psalms will not be read, those Psalms of lament, because they leave too many spaces for other answers.
Can you say that? Excuse
Oh,
me, but can you say that again? Which are the,
What do you think I said? Can you tell me what you think I said, and then that would help me?
I think you said that there's some of the Psalms are Psalms that are lament Psalms that we are, I don't know what you said. That's why I didn't understand it.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like,
Yeah, but I mean, I know that we go through all of the Psalms, and sometimes they make absolutely no sense as to
Right.
whatever else we're reading.
right.
Right.
But aren't
Okay.
there also times, I think one time I told you my spiritual director, I was having a problem with a boss. And she said, let's read Psalm 35. And you just put the word Michael every place it says my enemies.
Sorry.
And it both helped me, but then I was even more confused, right? Like I'm like, why then, it helped me because I can see that I was reacting in the way that the psalmist was reacting, right? Something's happening in their lives and they're being tortured, or it seems an insurmountable problem, or, people are cruel. But the bigger question is then, where is God? Why is God allowing this to happen? Or, on the other hand, why did God create this kind of situation? Right?
Well, that's some of the biggest questions that I have, period.
Right.
And so are those Psalms particular Psalms, or is that the theme of all the Psalms? So
No, it's
basically,
particular Psalms. When in his section called Despair, we're going to really delve into those.
okay. I got you. Okay.
So that's the questions he was trying to answer. I wrote it down somewhere.
I didn't mean to interrupt it. I just, when you said those things, that was like, okay, I've always wondered that. And then I couldn't follow what you said. So
No, that's it. That was exactly all I was trying to say, is that while the Psalms may not give you an answer, as in A plus B equals C, right? It might not be that. It opens us up to ponder all those things. It gives us a space for us to ask that question, and the freedom to ask that question, and to sit with something that's both troubling or terrifying or whatever, and allow God to help us inform our answer.
A good question is often better than a good answer.
Yeah, just to have it, but we don't, that's not really how school is modeled, is it?
No, not really well.
No.
Not big time. But
Right. I mean, a Socratic method of like asking a question and then leading to answer another question. I mean, that was, and so that would be more an Eastern way of thinking. Definitely not a Western way of thinking. So the Psalms were written, yeah, Maisie.
Well, another thing it does is show us that those issues go out all the way back with humankind to the very beginning, that we all have asked that question, and the psalmist asked that question because we do know that our God is a loving God, and yet those things always fly up into the face of that, and we say, but why?
Right.
And that it's common to all the way back to the psalmist, and that we just don't understand that.
Yeah.
And we ask that question. And it all comes down to he is God, and we have just to learn to trust that he is in control.
Yes, and whatever that process takes. And that it, I think also that without judgment, because we are people with minds and wills, there will be times when we are more or less able to live into what that means, right? We are, depending on the size of the injury that happens to us, the calamity that we befall, or that a nation befalls, or that a people befall, how do we manage that? I remember like talking with kids after Haiti, after the earthquake, and because I was involved in a parish that it had 3 churches and 2 schools and a hospital and gave all kinds of, sent pilgrims there 4 times a year, and the kids had been to Haiti. And then all the work we've done, all the things that we participated in, how could God allow this?
Yeah. Did you ever find out?
I mean, no kidding.
No kidding. No, I didn't. I understand that, the earth has a center that's basically unstable, surrounded by moving. I mean, I can give a scientific reason why there's earthquakes, right? And how we respond to the earthquake is the better question for us at this point. That was how I went with them. But I think those are the times that test us. And does it happen nearby, or is it happening across the ocean? Does it happen in my own family, or is it something that's happening far away? How does that impact me? What are the other circumstances that are kind of, interfacing with me at this time that can make things seem more or less troubling? So anyway, I just appreciated this because these are questions, as you said, Kate, these are questions we all have. This is not, it's not immature. And I think sometimes people think of it as immaturity to kind of question, how is God acting in my world? That's not immaturity. I think that's a vulnerability. And I think actually that's a sign of maturity, to kind of accept this sort of questioning, and that we can't change God. We can't change God. And I think that messes with us, because there are so many things that we do change and can change that can stymie us as well, right? Because we're all very accomplished people and we can do a lot, but we are not God. So
the other part of that, if I may, is not just natural disasters that we have no control over, but also needs and problems that we pray and pray and pray about and give to him over and over, and trust. And our questions then are why, after I'm doing all I can do to trust God with this, and it still doesn't, he doesn't seem to be there to answer it. And that's another question that.
Yeah, so let's look, Maisie, if you have the book in front of you, or any of you that have your
Joan
book.
has the book. Yeah.
I'm gonna turn to page 3. I don't know what it is in your Kindle.
I don't know either, but tell me, I'm a few bars and I'll find it.
Yeah, okay. It's right in the middle of the page and it says, it is the introspective
Voice
voice
of the
of
self.
the
Do
self.
you want me to read that?
Yes, would you?
Yeah, it is the introspective voice of the self, which particularly comes to the fore in Psalms, and which makes the book especially appealing. These Psalms express the cry of the heart and its opposite, the joy of experiencing God's presence.
Mm.
A psalmic author can in one moment describe a sense of abandonment. My God, why have you deserted me? And in the next moment, incomparable wonder and thanksgiving, as when an author imagines being led by a caring shepherder to placid waters, your staff and your rod, and then joining in a meal at God's own table. In fact, the discerning editor of the Book of Psalms has placed these two opposite expressions side by side in Psalms 22 and 23. The book consciously depicts a range of human emotions.
There we go. Which makes the most read book of any book in scripture.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I guess I never thought about it, so just having someone say it definitively was interesting. I mean, it makes sense that that would be the case. I just had never, considered, or if I heard it, I wasn't paying attention that day. I mean,
You can
There's a lot
open the Bible and find the Psalm immediately. It is so right in the middle that we can
right.
feel knowledgeable.
Yeah, I asked you, well, what if it said for week 1, we're gonna review the syllabus, so you can see that there, that most weeks, except for, the beginning of February, for 3 weeks in February, we're gonna read, 3 Psalms a week. Most of the weeks we'll read 2 Psalms. I want to know if you have a favorite Psalm and why.
Well, I have,
You don't have to quote it from memory, okay? This is not, it was just one that has resonated with you or that you enjoy.
well, I can't even remember their numbers is my problem. But the one that is, I will lift my eyes unto the hills from whence cometh
Comes my help. Yeah.
my help. My health cometh from the Lord,
Who made heaven and earth.
which made heaven and earth.
21.
He will
121.
not suffer your foot. What's the number of it?
121.
121, that's, Kate, that's the same one I picked.
Me too, Kate. Me too.
That's my fave. In fact, in my wallet, I carry it around. I couldn't find it in there either. I'm like, what did I do with it? That one and the one that they made into eagle's wings. And he will lift me up, you who dwell in the shelter of the Lord, who abide by his. Do you know what number that is? They made it into eagle's wings. The song.
Things came from that, so yeah.
It did, but oftentimes the Psalms reflect, and this I found out by reading the book, Psalms reflect pieces of scripture, so that whoever was writing the Psalm at the time may have had, been interested in 1 Kings, or in something Isaiah wrote, or in something.
So that's not a psalm, you who dwell in the shelter of
Yeah,
the
I think
Lord.
isn't it Psalm 4? I don't know. The ones that we say at evening prayer or at Compline.
You who dwell in the shelter of the.
I don't have a book of Psalms in front of me because I'm teaching this. Why would I have a book of Psalms? Okay, well, we'll continue. You'll do that research, Kate, and let us know which Psalm that actually is.
This one, he will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge, and that's
That's the one.
and that's Psalm 9:14.
Psalm 9. Okay.
14.
Lawson, do you have a favorite Psalm and why? You're muted, baby. You have to take yourself off mute.
Still muted, Lawson.
4 years into the thing.
You need it.
She
Working on
knows,
it.
she knows. We'll wait for you. Interrupt when you get it figured out. Irv,
I don't know that I do.
okay,
I've never been, Psalms haven't been one of my favorite parts of the Bible, actually, so.
there you go.
See it differently.
Okay.
You did rotation instead of muting.
Now you're sideways. Maisie, so what, you have 121, any other ones?
Well, this one that I was just saying, 9:14, he will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge.
That's the one that's the song.
Yeah, that's Psalm 9. His faithfulness is a shield and buckler. It's just along the same lines as the eagle's wings, I guess, but is it, like a mother hen shields and protects her young under her wing. It's like God has got us under his wing.
Sounds like these ones that we're picking that really talk about security, because I mean, who doesn't love some security?
Yeah.
I think that in 121, I mean, that is it, because we have that sense of God's presence always with us. And so I can see why why that's one that people would choose. And mine is Psalm 122, the next one. I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord.
Yep.
Now our feet are standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. And it's about Jerusalem and the place that people go. And then verse 6, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. Peace be within your walls and quietness within your towers. Because of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek to do you good. So it's been a grounding one for me since the early 90s.
Wow.
And right now, of course, there's hardly ever been a time in Jerusalem's history of peace in some way. Right? There's always been some conflict, and now we see it full on, but well, Lyda can't talk because she's at the car dealer.
Well,
Anyone
I like
else?
Psalm 8
Oh.
for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I read that on Thanksgiving Day. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. That's that one that says, the wonder of all your works, right?
That's right. When
Yeah.
I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them? Mortals that you care for them.
Yeah.
And I like 25 because I read that when I need to ask where to go next, and he does guide a little bit.
25.
To thee, O Lord, lift up my soul.
What? Hmm?
To thee, O Lord, I lift up my soul.
That's the one, 25.
Oh my God, in thee I trust.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Psalm of David.
All right. Lawson, you're unmuted.
Am I?
Yes.
Can you can hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
We can.
Okay. Mine is Psalm 139. You knit me together in my mother's womb.
Mm.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one of my favorites.
And I love that one. He will that Maisie loves, that he will cover us with his pinions, basically like a mother hen underneath his wings.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's about the safest place you can be, isn't
Matter of fact, there was a picture once of an area that had been destroyed by a wildfire. And they came upon a mother hen who was burned. And when they picked her up, underneath her wings dropped live little biddies.
Oh,
No.
what a wonderful story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So she had been burned alive, saving her babies.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, like I said, no one picked, no one, as of right now, no one picked a psalm like 35 or, like 87, not 87, 88, which is, "Oh Lord, my God, my Savior, by day and night I cry to you. Let my prayer enter into your presence. Incline your ear to my lamentation, for I am full of trouble. My life is at the brink of the grave. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am lost among the dead, whom you remember no more. You have laid me in the depths of the pit, in the dark place, in the abyss." It's not normally our inclination to go to those places. The Psalms have been for us a place of respite, generally. We think of the 23rd Psalm that's read. I think about the Psalms that are included in all the funeral homilies, right? Every one that you mentioned, I believe, is one of the suggested prayers from the funeral liturgy, right?
Well, I have a friend that, and I found it in my Psalms because I circled it, who always started the classes with Psalm 41, the first verse, talk, Kate, the first verse of 41.
Which says,
Oh, okay. "Blessed is he who considers the poor. The Lord delivers him in the day of trouble. The Lord protects him and keeps him alive. He is called blessed in the land. Thou dost not give him up to the will of his enemies. The Lord sustains him on his sick bed. In his illness, thou healest all his infirmities."
Yep.
That's a good.
That's a great one to begin any kind of consideration, isn't it? Because it is again a psalm of comfort. It is that who is there for us, and God is there for us. The lament psalms are, I am in trouble and there's nobody, right? That's the purpose of the lament, right? There is no one around that can help me, or who is it that can help?
Alice, I probably lean more towards what Irv said a minute ago, and have not read much in the Psalms. I've read all the Psalms, but what they come across to me as is so black and white, so extreme, both directions. But I'm always looking, and I was just checking my phone to see what I had there. I'm always looking for little phrases: count it all joy, be still and know. And the psalm that I have written there to remember is let me find it again, 66. Nor will God withhold his love from me, 66:18. And it's interesting because I'm looking in this New Revised Standard, and it says, if I had cherished iniquity in my heart, the Lord wouldn't have listened. Which I think is interesting. What I have from my Bible is God would not withhold his love from me. And that's very reassuring, but I have to admit I'm hit and miss with the Psalms.
I get something to what I said and what you're saying. I think the two thoughts that come to mind. First, it seems like Psalm 23 that you mentioned that. I mean, that's at 90% of all the funerals I've ever been to. It gets a little trite to me. I mean, it's like, okay, somebody's died and they're going to put that in there because and so it kind of wears thin on me a little bit. It's a beautiful poem. I mean, all that's great, but it's just the overuse of it to me and sort of the rote use of it. And the second thing, what you were just quoting there is something, I mean, you go to the Gospels and you get that same message, and to me, coming directly from Jesus through someone has a lot more power to me into the poetry here. And it's not a negative, it's just not as strong a positive to me.
And not a negative for me either, but when I read a song, I generally feel whiplash.
Yeah.
It feels almost like, two extremes, but at any rate.
So we're gonna come out of
I
this,
think that Rabbi Feld would agree with you, yeah.
so we're gonna come out of this class feeling a little differently about this.
I'm glad, or,
Yeah. I just feel it in my bones.
okay, I'm with you.
All right, Maisie?
It just occurs to me that there is a little phrase in a psalm, probably one of the longest psalms in the book, Psalm 91. But in there, there's a phrase that I use a lot. Lord, bless the work of my hands. When I'm doing art, and especially if I'm doing something for somebody, I just love that. Bless the work of my hands. And it can go into everything from cooking to, most everything we do.
Thank you. Yeah. Uh-huh. So different pieces of Psalm or the Psalter have entered us in some way. I think that's true.
Yeah.
That be still and know that I am God, has been part of how I begin my centering prayer since the beginning of time.
Mhm.
So I am that old. I have been praying since the beginning of time. Yeah, I think that, I think this is, what I appreciate you all saying is, how do I read the Psalms then, if I can go to the Gospels and get the same information from something Jesus said, right? How do I not feel like I'm being told two things or three things at one time and make sense of them? And I think that's some of the reasons that we might stay away from the text, from the Psalms, or see them as a place. But I hope that this class would, and not my teaching particularly, but Rabbi Feld's understanding through his own study of the poetry that leads us, again, I would say much like a poem. We read the poem in its entirety. We study a poem. We often talk about it with someone else. We frequently don't understand the poem because maybe we need to know more about the poetess or the poet. Sometimes that helps us. Sometimes it helps us if someone else has read the poem and says, well, this is why I related to it.
I like that.
Right?
I really.
Yeah. That's how I understand poetry is,
Yeah.
someone else says, oh yeah, but I read that when I was thinking about something. There's a poet named Galway, and he's written this poem called St. Francis and the Sow. I mean, if someone I hadn't admired hadn't said, this poem to me means this thing, I would never have gotten that. First of all, it's like a 4-page, and it's about a
St.
poem.
St. Francis and the what?
Sow, S-O-W. And maybe sometime I'll share it with you.
He loved animals.
He loved animals,
Oh, yeah.
It's like-
I'm sure that's the point.
the protection of God
That's a
over
big
God's
female.
people.
So if you love a pig, why would you not love everything?
That's
So
right.
that is-
That's something quite like that. But I would not have made that connection on my own. Left to my own devices, I would have said, this is a poem about a farmyard.
You needed that, please.
Well,
Okay, go ahead, Maisie, and then Sharon. Go ahead.
keep getting this thought, and I don't know whether, I don't know. But I have been in what for me was the depths of despair.
Mhm.
Totally, just thinking the only way out was to die. And for me, reading a psalm that talks about being in the pit of despair was not helpful.
No, not while you were there, probably, no. But afterward, knowing how common that feeling is among people, but not something we ever talk about.
Yeah.
I don't think you had you go to Cancun, you get a t-shirt.
You don't get a t-shirt.
You go to a mental hospital, you do not get a t-shirt. I mean,
I've got 3.
but all I'm saying is, those are things that, while we possibly, I would say maybe we need to share those, but where is it safe to share that? How do we do that? All of those things that maybe the Psalms offer some way for us to do some of that work, right? A way for us to discuss the things that we do not.
Once we're out of it, once we have come through that, to go
Right.
back and maybe see how God brought us through it. I mean, I can see where that would be, when you read the psalmist who's been in that place and then ends up praising God and thanking him for the wonders of his life, Well, I guess if he could find that, maybe I can too. Or something.
Well, and I think that, we're gonna see in the Psalms that there's both personal lament, there's communal lament, there's personal thanksgiving, there's communal thanksgiving. So it includes all those things. And so much, I don't know how much of it was used in worship. So some of them could have been call and response. Priest or leader of worship says one thing, people say the other thing, and so
Right.
on. So we're going to learn about the different applications of usage of them as well, which would make them more the schizophrenic part.
So I like, he talks about 3 categories that he deals with here of Psalms. The third being is the ones that explore new theology, that find reason to turn to God even when the feeling of absence is overwhelming.
Yeah.
So that's, me, sounds like the ones that I would want
Yes, me too. Yeah,
to
right.
listen to the most, so.
And those are the
And-
songs that he's categorized
And
as.
so Maisie, that's a thought. I mean, you don't have to focus on the ones that are
Right.
keeping your
And
best.
believe me,
On the one-
at those times, you see them and you move on to something else because you don't want any, you don't need to hear about somebody else's pain when yours feels intolerable. But, I can see at different times in your life, they're all very helpful.
Well, so there's the personal, and then how would we think about, if God is ever coming, like this is what we say, right, in the incarnation, it's what we say at Christmas, it's what we say in the Epiphany, if God is ever coming, and then how would we read these Psalms in that hopeful expectation as well? So, right, even in the midst of some traumatic political things, traumatic health events, whatever it is. So if the Psalms could be helpful, not just helpful for us, but if could show a way through.
A light. Yeah.
A reminder, as Maisie, as you said earlier, that, that the God that we believe in, or that we say we believe in, that we practice trying to believe in, is the God who loves and cares and is concerned for.
And our past experience shows it over and over. It's when we're in the depths of it that we lose touch with that assurance. Because we say, where are you?
Yeah, or anytime that there's a question about that, where are you? Yeah. Right. Right.
We're fickle.
Well, yeah, and then if we're believing in something we don't see.
Yeah.
So
I always think of the Israelites in the wilderness and how, they would just complain and lament, why did you bring us out here to die? And then God would shower them with food. And then down the road a few days, they were whining again because we forget. And we are sometimes
And we were,
unfaithful.
and yes, and how new were they to this understanding of a covenantal God? This was all very new to them. They
Mhm.
spent 400 years in slavery.
Yeah.
They did not have worship. They did not, this was a whole new practice of being, and sometimes it is for us as well, a whole new way of being, right? Where
But
it's going to
totally in the hands of God. They had to trust Him.
Right.
So often that's where we find ourselves, in a place where we have a choice. We can trust Him or live in total despair and hopelessness.
I mean, as a teacher, I can remember being disappointed when students that I thought was demonstrating trust toward didn't return the trust. Well, I had no idea, where they went home to. I had no idea where they'd been. I had no idea how other teachers had taught them. I mean, I was in the 5th through 8th grade, right? Like there was no way for me to know that. So they needed constant reassurance. I didn't learn that till I was almost finished, but it's exhausting. They needed constant reassurance that I found them trustworthy.
Mm.
And in order for them to trust me, constant reassurance. So I think about the people of Israel, and then I think about children I've taught, and I'm like, yeah, show me some bread. Show me some cucumbers today. Show me some stuff. Yeah, and that's, so, yes. And some of these Psalms do come out of that period as well. Not as many, but some do. Most of them arise from the Davidic period, and we know that, and David's been ascribed as the author of some of them, but as Rabbi Feld goes into great detail, that does not mean it could be from the school of David, the kingdom of David, people who look like David. It doesn't really, people who wrote like David, it doesn't necessarily mean penned in his own hand, but from that time. And then many Psalms that we know came out of the exile and the return, but they could be as early as 1000 BC that they were first, that some of them were around and repeated, and perhaps not written down until later, but maybe used in worship, maybe used just as how we tell the story of who God is, right? So that song might be there. But probably the last ones being written would have been after the exile, 60 years after the exile. So that even, 5th century would have been the last BCE, would have probably been the last Psalms. So in that time period of 500 years, they would have been recorded. Well, what else do you want to say? Sharon wanted to share something. I can't remember now what we were talking about, but
You needed me. It would be a great closing prayer at 5 till, but
I could just read the words,
well, that's a good idea too.
unless you're going to sing it.
I'm not gonna sing. Y'all, back in, I think it was the 70s, Anne Murray released a song, You Needed Me. And most of us listened to that as though it were, a song between two people very much in love. And in fact, it was written by a man who wrote the song for his wife. Anne Murray didn't do it, but I challenge you to, almost in the spirit of what we've been talking about with the Psalms, to hear the words of that as Allison reads them with different ears, as though the person who needed me was God. And so think about that as you listen, and when it names all of the things, I needed this and you did that, I needed this, you set me free, all of the things that God has done for us. And then to think on the heels of that, He's worked so hard to make me whole and to give me grace that He may now need me to do something for Him. Wow, that's a reason to live. So as Allison reads the words, please think in terms of you and the Lord and listen close.
Thanks, Sharon. Thank you all for being here. And next week in the syllabus, you'll see I'd like you to read Psalms 1 and 19, and that's chapters 1 and 2. Rabbi Feld does his own interpretation, meaning his own, he's a Hebrew scholar, right? So he's taken the Psalms and tried to be authentic as much as he can to the Hebrew. He talks about the challenges there, which I think is interesting. And so it may not be quite as you remember it or read it in the prayer book. The prayer book translation is not the New Revised Standard Translation. It's not any other translation. His translation that he uses is from Hebrew scripture. So